Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Ann Moore Grant, host of the podcast and also the founder of the Amicable Divorce Network. And I am joined today by Andrew Hatherley, who is no stranger to this podcast. He is the host of the Gray Divorce podcast. He is on the Amicable Divorce Network board as our financial chair, and he helps people all over the United States as a certified divorce financial analyst. And he has done chapter 49, which is how to achieve the best financial results. So that everybody is interested in this when they go through a divorce. They want the best deal possible. They want as much money in their pocket as they can get moving forward. And so we're going to give you some very actionable tips today on how to do that. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me again.
Very welcome. People get tired of seeing me, I think.
Not at all. I think every time you give information, people are probably taking notes. And so if you have the book, you can refer to these tips. This chapter starts on page 247. So we're getting about a little over halfway there. So we're getting there. As you guys know, in season 2, we're going chapter by chapter through the book, so that you can hear the authors, hear their tips, and get some more information on these topics. And Andrew, I'm sure these are tips that you give to your clients on how to prepare for their case and move forward. So thank you for sharing those with us. And so let's just jump right in. The first 2 tips you have are really about how to get ready, I would say. And it is make sure that you have money available to you. So tell us about that tip.
Well, as we all know, divorce is a cash-hungry process. You're going to need to pay your attorney. I know when I went through my divorce, one of the first things I heard was bring your checkbook.
Yeah.
So I was fortunately with the amicable divorce process, we're not cutting as many or as large checks, but that's certainly one thing. And the other thing is you may be moving out of your house. You may need to have money to pay for an apartment. You may not have your own car, so you may need to possibly rent for a while or get your own car. So it's very important that you have money available to you at the outset and access to it as well. And this is something that you should speak to your attorney about, because I know I deal with many clients where older clients, more traditional relationships, and the husbands control the purse strings, and the woman may not have an account in her name. Well, she needs money in her own name, and sometimes there's a misunderstanding that, if she opens an account in her name, that she's doing something nefarious. But no, it's not nefarious if you're hiding anything.
Yeah, correct.
And you're letting everybody know that you've got the money, but you want to be able to have access to it. And
I think that's so important. Is I advise a lot of people come to me when they're contemplating divorce, not quite ready, and I would always say, get an account in your own name and also a credit card in your own name. A lot of people have joint cards, or they're just a signature on somebody else's card. So that is something that's very important to establish. So you do have some credit in your name, you're establishing your credit score, and you have some flexibility moving forward. A lot of people just don't think of that. And then they're, sort of limited on what they're able to do to help themselves. Your next tip is to collect financial documents.
Sure. Well, part of my job as a certified divorce financial analyst is to help get my client and your client organized, and to gather all this stuff together so that they can have productive meetings, not only with me, but with you when it comes time to discuss the financials. The more we can get accomplished in single settings, the more momentum the case will have, the less delays there'll be, the less fees or hours the client will be billed, because they've got their act together and they've presented their financials in an organized, coherent fashion. And it bolsters your case. We went to the Nevada Family Law Conference last fall, and I was speaking to a judge, and he was talking about how many attorneys present really sloppy financial disclosure forms. And working with a CDFA such as myself, to put together really spiffy looking, organized, with footnotes and addendums, that can really impress a judge. Now, granted, amicable, we don't want to deal with a judge, but it always helps when you're working with your attorney to have the most organized, coherent forms. It just makes your case easier to work with. And psychologically, when an attorney's thinking, I'm dealing with Susie. Susie's a super organized one, and I just have to focus on my job.
Yeah.
Well, there's some benefit to that.
There's a lot of money savings. Over the years, I've had clients who come in with a very organized binder in chronological order. And I have clients who bring in a huge lump of things that I have to organize, or my paralegal. And the cost of having to do that is quite high, especially, when you have people billing at an hourly rate. So if people can just get it together, that it's very easy to review and verify. Sometimes you have to provide these documents to opposing counsel or to other professionals like you as a CDFA, even a mortgage professional, many different people. And it just streamlines everything when you're organized and can provide that information quickly without having to pay somebody to go through that. And sometimes that's hard for people to do. Maybe you have a friend that's a really great, organizer, and that's a really great use of your friends during this time is to say, I know you're very good at this. Can you help me with, this, as opposed to, some of the other situations where they just get people whipped up. But a really good tip that stood out to me is your third tip, which is don't overlook anything of value.
Yeah. Historically, this might have been something in a safe deposit box. I don't know how many people still using safe deposit box. I do, but you never know what secrets may lie in a safe deposit box. So know if your spouse has one. You can contact the bank, find out. But all sorts of things can be kept in a safe deposit box. Frequent flyer miles. These can really add up. I've been doing an awful lot of traveling this year and racked up quite a bit of frequent flyer miles. It can be quite valuable. Another thing, deferred vacation and sick pay. There can be money coming in, extra money coming in for one spouse. That's something to consider. Crypto, of course.
Yeah.
In this day and age, we're seeing this crypto accounts more and more, and these are sometimes the most difficult to get proper statements and understanding of what the value is. So for
the most part, crypto just has an app. So you can go to the trouble to get statements, but it's not like a bank account. So you really have to inquire, like, what coins are you invested in and how much. And I would also recommend to people to keep checking on that value, because crypto spikes, it drops, it's an incredibly volatile item. But on the day that is your valuation date, you need to look at, what's going on with it that day.
Yeah, definitely. It was all very roller coaster.
Another thing that I think people don't know enough about, and I lump attorneys in that as well. As a mediator, I often see how attorneys are advising their clients about settlement. And your next tip is a really important one, and that's to consider the tax consequences of the different assets.
Yeah, every dollar is not the same in a divorce settlement. A dollar that you might get from your spouse if he transferred half of his IRA to you. It's not as valuable as a dollar that you get if you get half of the bank account, because that IRA money is ultimately going to be subject to what something called a required minimum distribution, where the government forces you to take money out of your IRA, and of course gathers ordinary income taxes that distribution at the ordinary income tax rate. So a dollar in an IRA may only be worth 75 cents as opposed to a dollar in a savings account. Now, distinction, an exception in the IRA world is a Roth IRA. So Roth IRAs are tax-free, and they grow tax-free as well. Now, I've got certainly the right circumstances, and there's rules associated with a Roth IRA, but most people own Roth IRAs for a good long time and have that tax-free tax distribution. So those are kind of like the pinnacle assets. If you can get Roth IRA assets, those are better than regular IRA. Those are even better than bank accounts, because bank accounts would be subject to interest income tax over the course of
and is rarely as much interest as a Roth. You might get 78 cents in your bank account, whereas opposed to a Roth is going to, probably get a lot more interest on it over time.
Yeah, because Roths are typically invested in higher interest-bearing assets that typically have more investment assets, were a little bit more risky than a savings account.
Your next tip is to consider your timing when it comes to separation. Timing, in a lot of things, timing is everything.
Yeah, and I always say, many times a client will say, my husband wants to get this over with. I'm thinking, why is that? Why is your husband in such a rush? And
yeah, exactly.
Could it be that there's a major bonus happening at work in a couple of months, or a big commission's coming in? So these are things to certainly consider. It's a red flag whenever anybody's in a rush to get it done speedily. Now,
especially with a very long-term marriage, it's like it's been 20 plus years. Like, where's the fire now?
yeah, if it's not a girlfriend nagging to get it done, it's probably a bonus.
Yeah.
Or some extra cash coming in. I think the two are probably equal motivators for many.
It could be both, so it's always something to look out for. So if you start getting that, I would say, urgent feeling in your case, it's something, to maybe ask some additional questions about, hey, well, or do you anticipate? Because if a bonus was earned by work during the marriage, but is sometimes paid later. So we often see somebody works the whole year, they earn a bonus, but they don't get it until March of the following year. That's something to ask about. Is anything in the pipeline, that you've earned,
Exactly.
including restricted stock units and some different things like that.
I had a conversation with a lady recently, and her marriage was 8 years in duration, and she heard something about a 10-year rule, but she wasn't quite sure what it was. I said, oh, you're referring to Social Security, that if you've been married for 10 years, you're entitled to half the dollar amount of what your husband would receive for Social Security. Proviso, you're not taking anything away from your, and I should say ex-spouse. It goes both ways, husband or wife. But in this case, it was a lady. And I said, it's funny that you actually should ask that, because I've had a couple situations in workshops, I can't remember if it was a workshop or dealing with a client, where the marriage was 9 3/4 years in duration. And at that point I said, and they were older, in their 50s, and Social Security wasn't far away. I said, look, if you can hang on for a couple other months, you're going to get $300 or $400 extra a month when you claim Social Security by virtue of being married to this person for 10 years. It's interesting how timing can play into Social Security. If anyone has any questions about Social Security, I did a podcast episode all about that, and a Kiplinger's article. But there's lots of information out there about Social Security.
No, that's really great. And I think that's something that people don't understand. There's also a misconception that, for example, if the wife claims on the husband's Social Security, that diminishes his payment.
Yeah, not at all.
And that they don't even know that the spouse has done it.
And so they're not even going to, they wouldn't even find out necessarily unless you tell them. And once again, it doesn't even matter anyway.
Yeah.
But I do recommend speaking to somebody at the Social Security office. They're always going to look at your record and try to get you the benefit that is the largest potential benefit for you. In some cases, half of your spouse's Social Security benefit would still be less than what you claim on your own, in which case it's a moot point.
Yeah. It's good to know the information so you can make good choices. And if you can hang on, like in this situation, a couple more months, that could be, very valuable to you in the future. And that can help with your next tip, to prepare your budget and your balance sheet.
Yeah, budgets. It's funny. I was meeting with a client yesterday, and she was laughing because she'd heard on my podcast that I'd stated that people don't like doing budgets because she doesn't like doing a budget, and people don't like doing budgets. But when you're going through divorce, attorneys are typically going to ask for them, and it's a good idea from a financial planning perspective to understand. Now, I focus on what your post-divorce budget's going to look like, because if I'm going to be working with your attorney to determine how much we should be asking for spousal support or alimony, the key component of that is your needs. Your ex's ability to pay and your needs. And so the budget really helps us determine what your needs are going to be in your new life, and that's a tool, a very important tool. I
think it also helps to reduce anxiety. So many people are fearful that I'm not going to have enough money to take that vacation or make sure my bills are paid, whatever it might be, and they have this fear. Where if you can get the data and just, put it all down, discuss it, look at the assets, figure out a plan for success, it may cause you some anxiety to be putting that budget together, and, it is a bit of a pain. But then you have the information that you need to know to get your case settled and to feel confident that you got a good settlement that you can live with.
Definitely. It's a key component. Nobody likes doing them, but it's important.
Yeah.
And the high net worth divorces is actually a budget on steroids, which we call a lifestyle analysis, which is often used to determine spousal support. And that involves the work the involvement of professionals such as myself, where we look at very, very detailed expenditures over a period of 3 years. But those don't come up very often, but it's useful to know. But you mentioned the net worth statement. This is a key component as well, because I find many times, as a result of the divorce process, our individual net worth is pretty much cut in half as assets are split and liabilities are split as well. And I found that tracking your net worth post-divorce can be an encouraging process as you see that things are getting better. For instance, in my particular case, after my divorce, my car kind of gave up the ghost, so I had to buy a new car. And things weren't terrible, but I was watching my pennies a little more carefully, and so I determined I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and finance this car. I hated financing the car, but through tracking using a net worth statement to track liabilities such as car debt, I could see that the extra money every month that I was throwing at that liability was causing that car debt just to go away very quickly. And the thing was, I was taking some savings or income and paying off that car debt, but my net worth was still increasing because the liabilities were reducing very quickly.
Yeah.
So when I hate debt. And so I particularly hate debt on depreciating assets like a car. So it was a positive reinforcement that things were on the right track, as I saw every quarter that my net worth was still increasing. My savings account was increasing slowly, but the debt was increasing rapidly, and because of that, my net worth was increasing. So it's a very useful tool, I found.
Yeah. And everything that you're talking about, I want to be very clear with everybody, is something that as an attorney, I'm not qualified to do. Some of what Andrew talks about, I'm like, I don't understand that. I went to school for the legal issues and things like that. So it is really important when you're faced with these situations to get professional advice from the right person. I tell clients all the time, for me to learn about how to handle this financial issue, first of all, it's not in my wheelhouse. And secondly, at my hourly rate is cost prohibitive for me to learn about, certain things, as opposed to bringing on the right professional, because I'm not doing that work. So my hourly rate is just X'd out for whatever, that work is. And now you have this other professional doing their expert work in parallel to give us the best advice possible. Because what a CDFA does, I am not qualified to do. But I can definitely help with a simple budget. But when you're talking about asset projection over time, tax consequences on different assets, get the right person for that to help you.
Yeah, the key thing that worries people is, it's going to be so expensive to put a divorce team together. No, it can be less expensive, and I often tell people that's not the case at all. Just because you refer to the hourly fees, you can get 2 or 3 people for the price of one.
Sure.
Because if you're relying on a $500 an hour professional, that's just a number. Typically, divorce attorneys might charge $400, $500 an hour, and they're working on your finances and they're working on, soothing your emotions. Well, A, they're not qualified to do that, and B, they're doing it at a rate that is much higher than a qualified person would do it.
Yeah.
So, speak to your therapist at $150 an hour.
Or even a cheaper copay. You might be paying $25 an hour, and that's a big difference and much better help than what I can provide. I mean, I think divorce attorneys end up being sort of emotion, neutral, because it's a business transaction for us. We're trying to get those facts, advise our client, and help them. And so get a mental health professional, get a financial professional, build the right team, and your result and experience is going to be so much better just using the right people.
And, we've talked about the concept of brain fog or divorce brain. The emotional professionals are so important, because this divorce is likely the largest financial transaction in your life, and you want to do it with a level head, a clear head. And the little extra money that you invest in having somebody helping you regulate your emotions can pay off big time financially by helping you make the right decisions and work better with your professionals.
Absolutely. Yeah. Many people, I have to get this other professional, and they don't understand you'll be actually saving money and getting better information and advice from the expert in that area. So if you're approaching divorce and looking at building your divorce team, do explore this. There's a lot of information on our website, divorceamicably.com. There's a whole chapter about building the perfect divorce team in Divorce Amicably, all the different professionals that you might need, and then you can find all of them on our website, divorceamicably.com and amicableddivorcenetwork.com and amicableddivorcenetwork.co.uk if you're in England and listening to this. So you'd have a hard time not finding somebody that you need. Moving into sort of the next part of your chapter, you talk about why you need a chief financial officer for your divorce, both during it, which we've touched on, why it's good to have that advice and information during your divorce, but also after.
Right. Well, called the divorce chief financial officer. Essentially, he's working with, during the divorce, is working with your attorney to try and help you get a tax efficient settlement, get obviously as much as you can, and give as little money to Uncle Sam. But they're also looking at the future with a view, with a financial planning hat on, and so looking at which assets might work best with respect to your future income generated from retirement. They bring that kind of financial planning perspective, and I do work with people after divorce as well as a financial planner, and sometimes my divorcing clients will work with me afterwards on a financial planning basis. But your divorce CFO really, we talked a little bit about the psychological
right.
aspect in addition to the monetary aspect. They can understand, particularly in my case, having been through divorce and having changed my expectations about what retirement meant to me and how I felt about retirement, is that we can have that discussion with the client saying, look, yes, your net worth has dropped, you have less in retirement savings now, but let's take a look at what retirement means to you. What your work means to you. And if we put the person's life in front of their money for just a second, we think, okay, so what makes you happy? What puts you in that state of flow? What brings you contentment? In many cases, it's not really the $2,000 handbag or the $5,000 first class flight or the $30,000 cruise as opposed to the $5,000 cruise. It's things like relationships with friends, hobbies, could be gardening, could be grandchildren, could be playing tennis with your buddies. It could be writing. It could be starting a podcast. It could be any number of things. And these things don't require as much money. And so the financial services industry likes to focus on that magic number. There's actually been television ads in the past with numbers like 1.5 million floating in the sky and 2 million floating in the sky. Well, no, let's look at it in terms of your life. What brings you happiness? What brings you contentment? And how much do we need to finance that, to fund that life of contentment, as my friend Brian Portnoy would say? And quite often you get a different answer than you would have before divorce when, frankly, you had a lot more money. Now, that's not to say we can't rebuild financially, and certainly, and it's funny how when you start doing things that bring you purpose, doing things that are more meaningful to you, the money
they cost less.
It's like when I started focusing on working with gray divorcees, because I was divorced after the age of 50, and so when I reoriented my divorce practice and my financial advisory practice to working with people emerging from gray divorce, I found that I was well placed to share my experiences. And I had always thought this great goal of retiring at 60. I thought, okay, but then I started thinking about it. Well, what am I going to retire to at 60? Maybe I can reorient my work life so that it gives me more purpose, helps people more, adds more value, and continue with that until I figure out what retirement really means. Well, it's funny how things worked out, because I ended up starting a podcast at 59. We're now 2.5 years into it, and people are really enjoying it and calling me from around the country and working with me. And I'm thinking now, shoot, I can't retire. What's going to happen to the podcast? And so I will at some stage, because my wife's going to put her foot down. But this is I think something that a divorce CFO, particularly if they've been through the experience, can add to their clients' financial lives, is by kind of reorienting that approach to money and putting their life first and seeing how their money can serve their life. And it's interesting, as you go through somebody's divorce case with them, you get to know them and understand what their goals and interests are. That often translates very well into helping them with their financial planning afterwards, because say, remember you wanted to teach kids about gardening or whatever. You can do that. We can do that in addition to this or that. We can structure your life around what brings you meaning, but then have the finances work in conjunction with it as well.
Yeah, it's important to really focus on what your goals are financially, emotionally, and that happiness factor. What is going to bring you joy moving forward? Working with your team to say, this is my goal. Funny you should say that. I got into gardening this year, and it's really up and down. The deer came and ate all my roses, every single one, like they were little tasty treats.
Dear.
It is a journey, but Andrew, people listening to this, they love your episodes. Andrew's the host of the Gray Divorce podcast, which is focused on divorce over 50. And so head over there and listen to the information he has on his podcast, because it really is focused on that. And if you're watching the video, you've seen the Gray Divorce phenomenon. He's written tons of chapters in the Divorce Amicably book about financial issues in general and about gray divorce. So pick that up on Amazon. Andrew, if people want to reach out to you, and how is the best way for them to contact you?
If people want to reach out to me, if they want a free copy of the abridged paper on the Gray Divorce phenomenon, they can either email me at andrew@wiserdivorcesolutions, visit my website, www.trend. Only a boomer says www.
I know, I was like, you just showed your gray divorceness.
Transcend Retirement, HTTP, SS, whatever. Transcendretirement.net is the website, and all your favorite podcast platforms will have the Gray with an A Divorce podcast.
It's wonderful. And so if you're driving and you didn't capture any of that information, save this episode. Andrew's information will be in the show notes. You can also find Andrew Hatherley by going to any of our websites, amicableddivorcenetwork.com or divorceamicably.com, and you can find him both in our membership directory and as one of our board members that will also click over to his profile. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me again and sharing your valuable information.
Thank you very much, Tracy Ann. It's been a pleasure.